Okay, so when you're dealing with the Moorish paradigm, or just the nationality of people that have a culture, it's imperative for us, especially when we're coming into the space, to know know what happened in different points and timelines of our culture that we understand as ours. So it's kind of like we're doing it in reverse. We didn't come out from birth. Some did, but most didn't. We kind of got woke up later in our later years about the truth of our culture and stuff like that. And as you're going through this stuff, you're gonna notice there's different authors that speak about our history in different ways. They call us different things. Some refer to us as the ancient Egyptians. Now, all these is Moors, but the lens that they're coming from is all the Egyptians did this technological stuff and created all the alphabet, and sometimes the people are called people Phoenicians, and they created phonetics and phonics, and so you're really saying this, you know what I mean? So as I'm going through this, I think it'd be good for everybody over here that do demonstrations and they do missionary work and things of that nature, or they want to get in that space of doing that. Um, this is what I recommend as an option, and for clarity for when you're speaking with people as well. So let's first cross reference this book. This is called African Presence in Early Asia. So this is the, just to reference the book, The African Presence in Early Asia by Ivan Van Sertima. When you're speaking for a lot of different reasons, you could be speaking with people that are from that part of the world. Especially when you're dealing with, like, every time I'm doing missionary work or Khalifa Society, what is that? What's our mission statement? Oh, we're trying to unite people under the Moorish paradigm, let them know all parts of the world was under the Moorish dominions at one point. And that's how you can be a part of this if you want to show allegiance. I'm summarizing, but this is an example of what I mean. Say somebody's in front of you from China or whatever. And this book is a great book too. It covers Vietnam, covers the Philippines, it covers all that Southeast Asia, Hindustan. Yeah, basically the Tartarian side of the empire. This book covers it very well and very intricate. So just want to put that out there. But before we even get into it, just the title, African Presence in Early Asia. So if we're letting people know, like, oh, because you can just say, oh, these were Moors, but for a person that's not um astute, they're gonna be like, oh, you gonna just say Africans as Moors? Like, what do you mean by that? So let's go through a scholarly one way. There's many ways to skin the cat, but this is one demonstration that I felt pretty basic, right? Okay, so let's go to back to the definition of Africa, like we've done many times. When we're showing people from an Edomon perspective that Africa is not only Latin, not only that it means terra in Latin, that is land, not, it's also referred to as Libya, and it's also a Carthaginian territory. So before we even move forward here, okay, it's what's called Africa was called Africa by Latin speaking people in an era of when this area was ran by the Carthaginians. So the Carthaginians gave birth to the word Africa. And it was a designation for a territory that the Carthaginians ruled. Okay. Like I said, we can dissect this a lot of different ways as well. Right. 'Cause when you go down, it says the region around modern day Tunis. So we start thinking about Tunis and Tripoli. These are Moorish states as well. Phoenician, a derivative of the Phoenician Arabic afar, which just means earth. So if we're saying Phoenician, when the Moors that refer to as the Phoenicians said Africa, that implied that they were just talking about just the earth or any piece of land in general. All right. So now that we absorbed that, and then we would tell somebody that did not know who the Carthaginians were, like, do some research, but I do have something queued up. So now let's cross reference to a book called The Moorish Empire by Budget Meekin. All right. I love cross-referencing from this book. So now we're dealing with a book called The Moorish Empire by Budget Meekin. In this book, he's talking about a brother named Hanno, or Hanno, no, short for Hanno Bey. He was a general. Now, before I even get to that, let's look at a summary of who he is. Hanno the Navigator. When you look him up, they're going to say, oh, 5th century BC. They're going to say he's a Carthaginian explorer. They're going to say he was possibly a king. Well, we know he was a sultan, and sometime he played the role of assistant sultan before he was in that type of rank in the empire. But they're gonna make it summarized. But that's why the Moors are here to help you cross reference with the information. So, oh, Punic. Oh, Hanno the Navigator, sometime Hanan, which is Punic. Oh, what's this? The Punic language, also called Phoenician. So Phoenician and Punic is the same thing. Punic is saying, implying the people are Phoenician. They spoke. Oh, what's the line? What's the bloodline of these people? Canaanite. Oh, Northwest Semitic. You go to remember, everybody here should know that that's a code word. Whenever they say in Northwest anciently, they're talking about the Americas. We already did the map. Northwest of Mexum. He's the prophet telling you the divine name for Africa is a Mexum. So knock off the Africa as far as to say you got shipped from exclusively there, because the whole world is Africa, if you want to use it right. He was telling you. All right, so Northwest, Semitic, which is supplying. Some people be like, oh, that's Jewish or whatever. All right, so now let's go to the book, The Moorish Empire by Budget Meekin. So now when he's talking about the Carthaginian Hanno in a book called The Moorish Empire, and he's talking about nation states of Mauritania, wouldn't somebody that had a blank canvas to this be like, oh, so the Carthaginians is just Moors? But if you don't take them down this cross-referencing path, but you may know the information, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you just flying off the handle. Oh, I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing about any of this. Who is Carthage? What is this?" So that's how I like to. And remember, the focal point is a book that we're about to get into called "The African Presence in Early Asia." But I want to break down African in a way where people. So now when we read this book now, we know we're talking about the Moors in ancient Asia, because the person that wrote this book, Ivan Van Sertima, is not a confessed Moor. He's not a conscious Moor. He's just giving information about the Moors in a scholarly way, which is still cool. But we know at this time, people weren't calling themselves African at this time. So that's how we got to break it down for the people as well. Okay, so now we're looking at the African presence in early Asia a little different. All right. Because remember, the time frames that we're about to go into was like way back. As we see, look, 20,000 BC, 800. Nobody was saying calling themselves African at this time, right? So that's not technical. So now we know these are people under the Moorish Empire. Okay, so now the African presence in early Asia. To the Western mind, to blow this up, it's kind of fuzzy, but I'm gonna still blow it up. It's legible. To the Western mind, the Far East conjures images of glistening porcelain, precious jade objects, colorful silk garments, and infinitely wise sages. Ancient China is given priority as the most enduring culture in the Orient, short for Oriental. It is generally accepted that its modern inhabitants are primarily responsible for the creation of Chinese civilization. However, the evidence indicates a non-Chinese or African element as a seminal in propelling China towards civilization. So now that we went through the smoke and mirrors of Africa, we know, oh, a Moorish element in ancient China, which contributed to civilizing that area, bringing high culture to that area, right? The aim of this article is to identify that element. Anthropo, uh, Anthropological finds dating from Upper Paleolithic through the Mesolithic period. So we're dealing with 20,000 BC to about 8,000 BC. And when you cross-reference the time of the Olmecs or the Fushang dynasty here in America, you start seeing that this was the same time period. And in other books like Rocks Cry Out and there's other books that talk about how these clan of Moors went back and forth to Manchuria, back and forth at this time because the empire was over there too. They was like our cousins. This is all before the slave trade, history before slavery, right? We're gonna do a demonstration at the college. People that are classified as black, what was going on before slavery? All this stuff, right? That they don't even think of. They're not even talking about remotely in their school. All right, so let's continue. So substantiate the existence of the quote unquote Negroid type in China. So quote unquote, remember this Ivan Van Sertima was talking. So quote unquote Negroid types in China in 20,000 BC. So if you in Manchuria at this time, all you're gonna see is melanated people. That's the bottom line. And they're connected to the Moorish Empire. All right, so let's continue. At Chalkutin, in a cave near Peking, skeletal remains of an old man, quote unquote Negroid Neanderthal, comma, a woman Eskimo or Mongolian, comma, and a young female, modern day Melanesian. And these is all pseudo, Melanesian, a person with melanin. This is all, nobody's saying they Melanesian for one, but, or Negroid for that. So we have to kind of, like I said, us as the scholars will use information like this as cross-referencing because it is facts in here as well, but it's a lot of misnomers. Were found. So the anthropologist Carlton Kuhn considered the Eskimo a Caucasoid type, or implying Caucasian or quote unquote white. These skeletal remains are incredible in view of the evolutionary theories pertaining to man, because the ethnic features of many yellow people, in quotation, they're saying they have full lips. Diop has suggested the possibility of the Mongolian types originating from the mixture of quote unquote blacks and whites. So when you start getting people that are like, let's say, oh yeah, the yellow man, even though nobody's calling themselves yellow, right? But you're talking about an Asian phenotype of modern day. How did it get to that? How did it get a yellow tone? We're talking about an admixture between Albion and original woman. Keep it simple, right? The yellow race as well was probably the result of crossbreeding between blacks and whites at a very ancient time in the history of mankind. In fact, the yellow people have the pigmentation of mixed breeds, so much so that comparative biochemical analysis will be unable to reveal any great difference in the quality of melanin. And it has been observed that wherever there are yellow-skinned people, one still finds pockets of quote unquote black and white who seem to be in the residual element of that race. So when you go to like the mountains of China or the mountains of Taiwan or the mountains of the Philippines, you're gonna see these melanated people. They're not part of the general politics. They've set up shop in a sovereign way. They know how to deal with the land. They don't need government assistance. They're figuring it out. All right, so when we start talking about different skin, I don't care if you're talking about Mexican. I don't care if you're talking about any nationality on this planet. They go from dark to light. So we want to look competence because sometimes that type of stuff gets in the way of building skin tone. So that's why we always say it's about allegiance, even to the law definitions of the nationality. The biggest bullet point or pops off by saying your allegiance to it. It's not about the skin tone. It's about you pledging allegiance, which is an action because now your demonstration is showing that you pledge allegiance. All right, so even earlier fossil remains of the Negro type have been found in upper Pliocene period. So basically 50,000 BC to 10,000 BC. And once again, the reason I'm highlighting the time frames because you want to cross-reference this with the time frame of the Olmecs. You're going to see the pyramid builders of the planet. It was going on during this time by the same style pyramid, the same dress of people, The high science that was brought to these areas is consistent. It's the same. They're all called the Temple of the Moon and Sun. In Mexico, Peru, they call it in Hindustan, China, Pakistan, the Sumer Moors that were Sumerian that were looked at as being called Sumerians or what called today Persia or Iraq or Iran. All these Moors that were building pyramids and setting up dynasties that had similar culture, the same setup. The temples look the same, everything. And they call it the Temple of the Moon and Sun. Every one is called the Temple of the Moon and Sun. All right, um, huh? So from southern China, the provinces of Szechuan and Genghis, Gangxi, two human skulls, the Tizu Yang man or Mongoloid Mongoloid and Liu Chang or Liu Kang, the Negro type man, have been unearthed. And so we have a mixture of the Barbary and Tartary um, anciently in these areas. One of the bases of the two skulls, one might be tempted to suggest that the population of southern China represented an early form of Homo sapien, which later differentiated into some of the constituent elements of modern Mongoloid and the oceanic Negroid populations. Oceanic Negro. So that means that, so when you break it down for the people, you're going to be like, oh, this is a way of them saying the Moors being seafaring and they travel the ocean. So what is an oceanic Negroid? You feel me? So the information and truth is out here. We just got to ask Moors and the scholars of modern day have to just cross reference to death and help people see the uncut truth of what's being presented, right? Because these PhD authors, they're doing scholarship, they're doing research. It's just a lot of misnomers. All right, so one, let me blow this up a little bit. I'm talking about Jal Islam. Peace enough. All right. So one, the peopling and settlement of Asia from Africa, identifying African people as Asia's first modern human populations. And we already went through the African demonstration, right? So this is Moors anciently being in Asia. That African people, quote unquote, black people, are the aborigines to Asia. And that subsequent and periodic migrations and movements of African people into Asia occurred throughout antiquity. Antiquity, look at that up, it just means ancient. So from time immemorial, from the earliest records of humankind, we was in Asia. And in fact, when you cross-reference different books, like I said, the early African presence in early America, this book, Moorish Empire by Budget Mickey, you're gonna see that we traveled back and forth long before the slave trade. And as a matter of fact, some of the Moors, such as like sultans like Abu Bukhari, which later you have sultans like Mansa Musa, but the sultan before Mansa Musa, Abu Bukhari, of the Moors that created the Mali Empire, that sultan over there came over here in the 1200s, 1300s, and set up what you ultimately became the Aztecs, right? Because the Aztecs was foreign to America compared to the Mayans and Olmecs. But like, you only get this information if you cross-reference different books and put it together. You know what I mean? So stuff like that. That's why the scholarship is very important. And everybody, law and history go together. Because you're able to enforce the law better if you know the history that goes. Because it all tells a story. You know what I mean? Because you have to demystify the whole Indian thing, and there's a lot of things you got to do when you kind of enforcing, because everybody's in a fog. All right, so let's continue. All right, two. I think it was number two. Right? Yeah, the impact and extent of the Moorish presence in the human cultures and classical civilizations of early Asia. 3, discernible Moorish elements and underpinnings of the major religions and philosophical movements in Asian antiquity. In Asia, yeah, exactly. Antiquity means ancient. Yep. So, but pretty much you're saying ancient Asia. All right. So the Moors were responsible for not only the philosophy, but the religion. So how everybody's Buddhist or um, whatever they are over there, how all that's a derivative of Moorish science, philosophy. Because in ancient cultures, even the language, you notice how every language but English has a masculine and feminine version of that same word, moreno, morena. Everything prior to the colonized, hybrid, bastardized language, there's masculine and feminine working together in period, yin and yang, right? All these things to promote balance, mayat. These are ancient principles of the old world that have been on purpose dropped and forgot about, squashed. And the people that are showing remnants of having culture, you see they do the best for themselves community wise. They got each other back as a sense of honor. So all this is connected. We're talking about what we're reading right now. 4, historical. Sabotage. And it sabotages the demonstration. Now, number 4, historical, anthropological, and linguistic relations between Asia's Africoid, Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Semitic populations. So when we're looking at that, we're looking at Barbary, Tartary, Albion, and then they're gonna say we spoke Semitic languages like we just looked up. When we looked up Hanno Bey, he was Carthaginian, and he's in the book called The Moorish Empire. You looked up his bloodline and said, oh, Semitic and Canaanite, or Canaanite and then Semitic, which is implying he was Jewish. In today's world, they look at Semite as, oh, So 5, the enslavement and subjugation of African people in Asia. So we will go through a period where same thing like in different lands, how the hybrids basically went to war with their fathers. You had an element where the Romans had their tentacles in a lot of different places. Matter of fact, it's a documentary called Shogun, where it showed how the quote unquote Japanese, we won't call Japan at this time, but they were the Catholics were influencing the area. They created a divide between North and South, where one was influenced by the Catholic Christians and one was more indigenous. So the ones that were being puppetized by the Catholics, they were practicing the skin tone game. They're doing the same politics to try to flush out anything that was have remnants of the empire and sultan or Muslim way of life. All right, number 7 or number 6, ancient and modern documentation and histography of the African presence in Asia. 7, major population centers and geographic locations of African population in Asia from antiquity to modern times. Nomenclature, number 8, nomenclature and designations for African people in Asia. 9, the numbers of proportions of African people in Asia from antiquity to modern times. 10, the status of the global African community in Asia today. All right, so once again, you go into the mountains or any of these areas right now, you're going to see heavily melanated people because that's the root of that area. So my point is, when I'm bringing this up, is for the point of demonstration, like as if y'all are dealing with the general public in passing, whatever you're doing, somebody showing interest, you can walk them to a scholarly road. So I open this up by looking at the title of the book, African Presence in Early Asia. Somebody with a blank canvas, how would you let them know without just saying it? Oh, these are Moors. These are Moors in early Asia. How would you prove that? Right. So I walked to a one demonstration, right? Moorish Empire by Budge Meekin, Hanno Bey, one of the Moorish navigators. It was one of the headlines of the book. So clearly he's a Moor, and he's loosely referred to Carthaginian. And before we even went to that, we looked up Africa and etymology, where Africa in Latin just means terra, earth. It represented the Carthaginian territory. All right, so the Carthaginians created the word. So we created the word Africa, but we're not African. All right, so we lay the foundation. So we have to make it that simple for the general public, because the people need facts. All right, so now we were in a BC time frame. Let's go to another time frame of our culture of people and what we were doing. Now, this book is called The Golden Age of the Moor by Permita Bay. Excellent book. Excellent book. So let's jump to AD. We was in BC time. We in AD time. So let's say 700 to 1492. All right. So agricultural improvements. The Moors and other Islamic people of Al-Andalus introduced new kinds of horticultural methods and types of plants, fruits, and vegetables, which were virtually unknown outside of Africa and Persia. From Africa and Asia came rice. And keep in mind, same thing. We know Africa. Just look at it, the more, from Barbary to Tartary, the Moorish Empire created rice. People, citizens of the Moorish Empire created rice, which is aruz in Arabic or aruz in Spain. And we did a demonstration a couple of weeks ago, like the whole Spanish and how, the roots of it, how it came from Latin and how Arabic and Latin or Arabic and Spanish rather pretty much sound the same because they have the same root. Here's an example of that. Aruz is how you say rice in Arabic. Aruz. And aruz is how you say rice in Spanish. It's the same word. It's just a vowel is just changed. But vowels are interchangeable. It's spelled like that in Arabic, spelled like that in quote unquote Spanish, Moorish Latin. All right. So it appeared on Spanish riverbanks in the 10th century, according to records of Arib ibn Said, secretary to the ruler of Al Hakim II, which was one of the sultans. The 900, his reign was from 961 to 976. I just want to highlight something. You're going to see when you start reading books that are talking about this time period are people's names. A lot of Arabic names. Something Ibn something. Something Ibn, something bin Yosef. Like think of Jesus, right? His real name is, his Aramaic name is Yahshua bin Yosef or Yahshua ibn Yosef. So a lot of our names, because in English that means Yahshua, the son of Joseph. If you're talking about, but you're saying Yahshua ibn Yosef. So you're paying respect to your ancestors and your title, which is a trust law. Now you're invoking trust law as far as inheritance and things like that. Your bloodline. All right. And all of these are matriarchal principles of passing things down through the mother and principle, like hereditary law and stuff like that. That's what gives rise to trust law. Because I want to throw that in there. So cotton had been introduced to the Iberian soil in the 9th century. On Andalusian soil, the Moors also grew several types of medicinal herbs, or dandar, dardar. So the trees, or ash tree. So the medicine was in the plants. It was well understood that to heal people, you have to get tree medicine or plant medicine. These were grown abundantly in Spanish regions like Silvia, Elviar, Selba, Elviar, Chaleur, or Nevada. See how they threw that in there? So I'm not going to go over it right now, but when you talk about we're going to get into the Almoravides and the Almorahads, which are clans of Moors that when you look them up, they're going to make it seem like, oh, this is just an Al-Andalus. Let me check the chat. I'm going to run in my mouth. Somebody has something? I know, but let me see. Okay, now some should say Islam. Okay, so when you start looking up the Almoravides and Almorahads, they're going to tell you these are clans of Northwest African Moors that end up conquering Spain from 711 to 1492. Even though Spain wasn't called Spain until after 1492, we call it Al-Andalus, but that's how it's going to be pushed, right? But in actuality, these Moors started over here in the Americas, in Northwest Africa. That's why I keep telling you that's the schism, and it was going to have people having a headache because they can't. they don't understand about the Great Book burning is that they switched up maps, time frames, and to make you think you got shit from somewhere that you really it's a myth. So the Alamo is is what it's called. It's in Texas today, but we know that's Mexico before the annexation of Texas. But what I'm saying is the Alamo V clan built the Alamo, and they call it a mosque, one of the first mosques in Mexico.
I'm gonna put that on my social media post.
Yeah, for example, where the Spurs used to play at the Alamo Dome, these are over there in Texas. But just look up the Alamo, you're gonna see that's Moorish architecture. So I want to put that in there as well. So when he's talking about the Moors and he's talking about Nevada in parentheses, he's dropping clues on a lot of the stuff that the old world started over here as well. And then we migrated that way for the, one of the reasons was it was a plague over there. And everybody was what they wasn't bathing and all this type of stuff. So there's a lot of reasons why we had to go up in there. That was the cancer to humanity. All right, so let's see. So this enterprise was obviously tied to the medicinal and pharmacological skill and interest. The quality of the herbs was said to rival those grown in India and other Eastern countries. Andalusian botanists. So now when you're hearing Andalusian, just think Moorish, right? Such as here we go, Ibn al-Wafi. So now you know that's his father. Now that we broke that down. Ibn Basil, Ibn al-Hajjaj, and Ibn al-Awam conducted special studies on the productivity and quality of the land. Ibn Basil partitioned the land into 10 different classes according to particular characteristics. So we're talking about zoning, from commercial and residential. That's all Moorish. We've been doing that, and taught farmers ways of increasing the fertility of their plots. So we teaching plant medicine, we zoning the land. Moors is teaching farmers on how to intensify their potency of the soil. This is what's going on. This is different from Black history. This is remember life before slavery. Remember, this is what we're doing. Geological studies were done in order to locate sweet water below the Earth's surface. Widespread use was made of the water wheel or the nahua, which the Romans knew about but had utilized very little. The Moors dug canals and channels which irrigated farmlands and provided water for several thousand mosques, palaces, and public baths. This is life before slavery. It's a whole different narrative. Some of the most highly productive lands were at Saragossa, Meridia, Tudela, Murcia, or Tudmir, Evela, Malga, Lorsa, and Baga. So all these was like Andalusian city-states. Studies of Iberian soil, along with the Moorish introduction of new methods, plants, tools, manures, right? Manure, the concept of manure to help fertilize, right? Helped to dramatically increase the fertility of the Iberian land. Because remember, we went up in there because it was barren, it was homosexuality, they wasn't bathing, it was a plague. We had to shut down the Black Plague. And then you brought up something how when you learn about the Black Plague, you learn about how when the Pilgrims came over here, they brought the plague, right? It's all connected. The people that brought the Pilgrims that brought the plague, the colonizers that brought the plague is part of the same crew that we had to shut down and help them bathe. It never, at whatever time. So the reason we want to know it like that and present it like that is because these can't be the people that have been shipping us from Africa over here, slaves. They didn't even know how to bathe. They didn't even know how to conduct. They didn't know how to navigate ships. You know what I'm saying? So that's a scholarly way of like opening our people's mind up to how we've been made a fool, basically. Where I leave off at?
Astrolabe.
Where?
The astrolabe.
Okay, the astrolabe. was even employed by the Moors in leveling the land for easier irrigation, dealing with the land, so we can create irrigation systems. But not only did Al-Andalusia Muslims increase the productivity of the soil and introduce new vegetation, they also ushered in the science of food preservation and storage. So, right, drying out fruit, put it in glass jars. We might got to eat a certain way for the season, just to last to the next season, right? Moorish methods of preservation. I'm sorry. At Saragossa, wheat was preserved for as long as 100 years. Moorish methods of preservation and drying enabled such fruits as figs, plums, cherries, and apples to remain edible for several years. Ibn Awan, he was around in the 12th century, was a botanist who wrote in great detail about the process of preserving olive oil, corn, and various fruits. I'll read two more paragraphs because I did bring up the Almoravids, but I wanted to drill home the point of two different time periods of Moorish culture. But we'll get into two more paragraphs. So before turning to the main focus of this essay, it is necessary to say a bit about what I consider to be the most significant dynasties which entered Al-Andalus. What makes these dynasties especially significant is that they were most certainly African. Or just Moorish, right? In that they both had a great and positive impact upon the science and philosophies of Andalusian society. These two dynasties, the Almoravids and the Almohads, left very undeniable impressions upon Spain and ultimately Western European society and development. Yeah, that's good enough. I just wanted to, yeah, I'll leave it there. Since I brought up those two clans of Moors and I brought them up in the context of the Alamo being built in what they call Texas today, but Mexico. Those are the two clans that, Alamo, the Almoravids specifically, these, and also not only they built that mosque, but they went up into Al-Andalus and shut down the people that weren't bathing. They built all the libraries. They brought the concept of, like I say, herbs and holistic way of life, government structure. Then all of a sudden they start having kings and queens and things of that nature. Well, actually, we start inbreeding with them actually, and their sons. Our sons start forming the Roman Empire. So, what?
This paragraph starts to talk about the mixing of the Catholics and the Muslims, and then talks about how the Catholics started to secure the military and started to take over pretty much.
All right. So, but what I summarize is they talk about it right here.
Yeah.
So when we say like the Catholics and the Muslim, we're talking about
Like
yeah. Think about the Moors that had a sultanate or sultan system interbreeding with the harem, the Slavs, which created a mulatto race. These mulatto race, fast forward, created Catholicism and the Roman Empire. So these mixed Moors are going to war with their fathers. So now you can look at this sentence a little with different contexts. Catholics and Muslims would mix, right? Even more freely in such Moorish controlled cities. Unfortunately for the Moors, it would also be the turning period. And now you got these mixed Moors that the Visigoths are Catholics, Hispano Visigoths, and then they start tagging our people Hispanic, and that's where you get this term Negro. These mixed Moors will go to war, unite their kingdoms together. Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand, all these Roman Moors wanted to shut us down. 1492 marked the end of that reign from 700 to 1492. The Red House was invaded, the Alhambra, and then the Moors got exiled. Some stayed and became Moriscos, which would we practice our culture in secret, but openly we're looked at as Christians, or we were labeled Moriscos, basically, Moors that switched up, basically because they want to get their family slaughtered and all that. Now some left and got, exiled and came down to South America. And I did demonstrations on how what's called Venezuela right now and what's called Colombia, all that stuff was called New Granada. Old Granada was where the Alhambra and stuff was, stuff like that. So um, all this history, to know that, you have to cross-reference books, and it tells a story. I haven't sent her a piece because she's doing something for another nonprofit she works for.
For Black History
For
Month.
Black, the same tip for Black History Month. I think it was from this book. It was talking about Christopher Columbus. And
Was it this book?
yeah, it was the Golden Age of the Moor. It was talking about
And the
how
book burnings.
yeah, the great book burning. So Christopher Columbus came over here after the Moors fell over there, and basically came to get some more of the empire because they was feeling cocky. We just defeated the Moors over here. Let's go to the headquarters and try to do the same, right? So they knew that the empire was connected. It wasn't just I just discovered America and these people look just like the people in Hindustan with the Turk, So and he was drove over here by a Morisco Moor that knew how to navigate the sea because he didn't, right? So these are things that they're glossing over conveniently.
They even talk about how the libraries were.
Right, the library and the mosques.
Thousands of volumes.
Yeah.
And the Catholics, their libraries are very, very small. Pretty much saying that they're almost like illiterate compared to the Moors and everything that they burnt up. And the Catholics, anything that was foreign to them, they labeled it as the devil's work.
Right.
And that's why, their God or whatever, pretty much it's the devil's work. So we gotta burn everything. We gotta erase the history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they call it Saracens. Yeah, okay. I don't think I'm gonna find that. I'm trying to find why she was talking what I sent her.
Is it page 31?
It was 31, right?
I think so.
Since we're talking about it so much, they might get into that. 31, you say, huh?
I think so. That's my phone really quick. On the email. You sent me an email screenshot.
Okay, you want to find it or?
Okay.
Let me see.
Or was it page 13? Okay, we're gonna.
I think it was 13.
13? Okay, we'll find it.
Okay.
It's in here somewhere for sure.
I think it was 13. That made more
Did you
sense.
pass 14?
Did I? Okay, yeah, I think it is up in here. Oh yeah, here we go. Yep. Page 13 of a Golden Age of the Moor. So this is what I sent. And she used this in one of her pieces for her slides. It says the world changed dramatically in 1492, not only because Columbus stumbled in the direction of the Americas, using the magnet of a myth to draw millions behind him, but because that was the very year the Moors were defeated in so-called Spain, right? It is not an accident that it is Spain and Portugal who spearheaded the movement in this direction to the Americas. It was on January 2nd, 1492, that the African leader, we already know the Moorish leader, every time we code name African, Abu Abdi Lala, otherwise known as Boabdil, surrendered to the Spanish. Boabdil. So that was the official end of a reign. And the reason it's good to know specific names because now we can pinpoint timelines and specific heads of government at this time. So that was to be specific. This is specific. So this crew of Moors surrendered in this time because we were outgunned, a lot of traitor stuff that happened. There's a lot more to the story, but so Jane Carey compares the illiteracy of the Christian Europeans to the learning and erudition of the Moors of that time. The comparing is so startling. His comment is worth quoting. So he said, quote, at a time when the most insignificant provinces of Moorish Spain contained libraries running into the thousands of volumes, the cathedrals, the monasteries, the places of Leon under Christian rule numbered books only to the dozen. So
hundreds, dozens.
Dozens. So these Romans didn't read. They were illiterate. They wasn't bathing. They barely started bathing. So this author is laying the foundation that the Moors had thousands of volumes of libraries.
In the mosque.
Right, in the mosque and all these things. and these Romans didn't. They had like dozens of books.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Um, so the book burnings too. So look, to the narrowness of vision this produced among the leaders of the church and state was to have catastrophic effects. It led to the massive burning of Moorish and Arab books under the order of Cardinal, which is a Roman leader or well, considered a pope, actually like a Roman emperor, actually. Yeah, he ordered that these books be burnt. All these books that prove that we understood high science, what we was doing, our culture, burn them. Once they invaded Spain, 1492, you start moving forward, burn any remnants of Moorish America. Burn it down best you can. Because obviously they can't burn everything, but they was under orders. All these Jesuits was under orders by the Pope or the Roman Emperor, Byzantine, etc. Shut all that down. It inspired a similar bonfire of the books of Native Americans. So that's what I'm saying. They successfully shut an aspect of the empire down. They say feeling good now. So we're gonna come to the headquarters and try to shoot our shot. But obviously that didn't work immediately, right? Because 1492, well, we had a treaty of peace and friendship in 1780 something. So obviously they were not successful in totality. The empire fell in stages. The whole empire fell in stages, right? Just
Yeah, the Punic Wars and all that stuff.
right, the Punic War. So it fell in stages. Where was I going with that? Okay, so you see the tactic of the Romans was burning books in Spain, then they came over here and burning books in the Yucatan in Mexico, where the Temple of the Moon and Sun is at. All this Moorish intelligence, the Area 51 it out. Oh, it's aliens, stay away. They're knocking noses off architecture, like the Sphinx and all that.
Yeah.
All right, so it inspired. Yeah, that's my point. I don't. Oh yeah, no, yeah. They're the works of the devil. Yeah, burn them all. They're the works of the devil. So all these popes and Roman emperors saying, like, burn all these books. These are the works of the devil. We don't want these heathens all in you. You know, the philosophy of these heathens, the Mayan calendar, the devil, astrology, the devil. Knowing about the stars, as above, so below, the devil. Any culture prior to the Roman Empire, the devil. All right, so I wanted to cross-reference those two books for different reasons. Not only is it different time frames in history, but you can kind of see a timeline of how did we get to the position of where we Black Negro colored. You know, all the answers are in this demonstration that I'm giving you, but you can start piecing some things together, right?
You talk about the number system right here too. In the next paragraph.
What you referring?
Right here. So the number system that we use today, for example, brought in by the Moors from India, was seen as late as 17th century in some parts of Europe as signs of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And as a religious mission for men like Ximenes and successors to erase history of all memory of the Moors.
So now you got people's names that you can do independent research on, right? Any thoughts on that? Let me open the floor. I said a lot. Any thoughts on any of this? Anybody learn something? Somebody let me know how they feeling in the chat. I see Rolly, you trying to unmute? You trying to figure out the unmute?
And I see his finger in the camera.
That's a little mic. You might got to tap the screen and the option will come up.
Will you unmute him?
Oh, you know what? Let me ask you to unmute. Did you get a request? There you go.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's very interesting what you're reading here, and this goes in hand in hand with a book called The True Myths about the when we were the original Vikings. It's also he tells the story of how we came from here and moved to there, and we spread it out to other people. So that puts it even more together for me. That's really interesting. I have to get this book. I did have it in my save list, but I never collected it. But I can get it on, as I see, you have it online. So
PDF.
this
Yeah, the
is,
PDF.
yeah,
Just text me that you want the book so I can have it in my. I just email it to
cool,
you.
cool. Appreciate it because this is pretty deep. I like it. Thank
Slime,
you.
slime. Any other thoughts, comments on this space?
Yeah, I think this is great because the fact that the Moors, if it weren't for the Moors, Spain wouldn't have been anything, basically. You know, um, it's funny because I was thinking about Spain one time, and I was thinking about the music, some of the dancing style, and their architecture that they're known for. And and I go around LA and I see sometimes they'll say, like, I remember in art history class they'll say like Spanish style, but they're really talking about Moorish style, like Morocco and stuff like they're really talking about Moorish style. And and I remember being in history class also back in the day, and we're talking about Western civilization and European history. And I remember being younger when the professors, when the teachers, not the professors, being in high school, when the teachers never really mentioned the Moors too much. They mentioned them a little bit, but they talked about medieval Europe and all that stuff and how they were in the Dark Age. But then I remember getting to college and finally hearing and knowing how Europe was so backwards. They were so backwards. It took the Moors being there, that presence of them just being there, for like civilization to exist in Europe. That was like the only light of civilization in Europe, because the Moors were there. And so I appreciate this information, definitely. I always appreciate any information about the Moors, especially when Spain, because I had a friend that lived in Spain, and she lived in the southern part of Spain, which was that Andalus area. And it's just fascinating. Every time I think about it, when I think of Spain, I don't think of the I don't think of that northern part of Spain. I don't think of that European Spain. I don't think of blonde hair and blue eyes. I always think about when the Moors were there, that presence, So thank you for the information. It's always appreciated.
Slime, slime. Okay. Hmm. So
You,
the
you know
next.
what's cool, Mafia, is I lived in Europe for 40 years.
Oh
I lived
wow.
in Germany for 20 years. I lived in Germany, actually 21 years, and I moved there and I lived in Greece for another 19, almost 20 years. So I've seen a lot of this stuff, what we're reading about. I've seen a lot of it. And I've been to Spain, I've been to Italy, I've been to all that. So I've seen a lot of this, and this is just really putting it even more together from what you're seeing. It's totally different from what you're seeing it and when you're reading it. And it's amazing. We have amazing history.
Hey,
You.
slime, slime,
Islam Granite Sheik, beautiful
slime.
presentation as usual, man. And congrats Joe on your presentation you get ready to present at the college. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you have some movies with you and things of that nature, you know what I mean? Because you're exposing some things that they probably aren't taught in their curriculum in that college. So you're going, kind of in a sense, knock the pillars down in a sense, so Islam on that, you know what I'm saying? And maybe some of those ginger shots and things you be making, you know what I'm saying? You might want to take those with you and just give them out to, to interact with the college students, give them out and stuff and point them towards your website and things of that nature and point them towards the Moorish paradigm, Islam, brother.
Slime, slime, slime. Yeah, once again, that's February 23rd. Whoever's in the area, it's gonna be at Long Beach City College.
I
Whoever
wish I
wants to.
wasn't so far.
Yeah, I
Shit.
feel you. I feel you, man. I'm gonna try to get a cameraman, get some good footage
Yeah.
for the
Record it.
demonstration. Yeah. Um,
Even if you don't, brother, you still gonna make an impact, bro. So it don't even matter. We know you're gonna do your thing because you do your thing every Sunday for us. So you know what I'm saying? Islam.
Islam.
wow. All right, let me transition to the metaphysical Bible dictionary and Ark of the Covenant is what we're dealing with. Um, I like using stuff like this for, most of our people are Christian for the most part. They've heard of certain things in the Bible, Ark of the Covenant, Genesis, certain things, Abraham. People know certain bullet points. So let's get into the metaphysical definition of Ark of the Covenant. And I want to have a conversation about it after. Metaphysical. Noah's Ark symbolizes the spiritual part of oneself, built in the midst of the flood of error. So once we're in the flesh, we're in the lower self urges, and it's a never ending fight against that until you get back in the casket. Right. One builds one's ark on the scientific understanding of wisdom, presence, and power of God. The ark is built upon the affirmations of what one is in spirit. One takes into the ark one's wife, one's son, and their wives. And you got quotation, spiritual principles inhering in the soul. And of every living thing, of all flesh, two of every sort. We got male, female, positive, negative activities of life in the organism. That is, a firm spirit as all in all, as primal essence. The Ark of the Covenant is a sacred ark. Our Ark of the Testimony represents the original spark of divinity in man's being. It is a covenant or agreement of the Father with the Son, that he shall inherit all that the Father has. All things whatsoever the Father hath are mine. That's literally in the Bible, John 16:15. So we're talking about inheritance laws, trust laws, but we're also talking about activation of the higher self in the midst of the flood of error. In the midst of having this carnal experience, we're going to try to reach the higher self. All right. As well. So the original spiritual spark is a very sacred, holy thing, because upon its development depends man's immortality. It is represented as occupying the most holy place in the temple and as being protected and cared for with great devotion. All that man is has been brought forth from this central spark. Yet the sense-conscious man often neglects it and ignores its very existence. The attention is taken up with the things of sense to the exclusion of spirit. So, spiritual unfoldment, understanding, I guess, your conscience, as you keep getting information, as you keep getting lessons of what morality is, and you have that instruction book. Now it's just about your willpower. But once that spark happens and you start exercising and demonstrating, you're showing willpower, right? And that's what the covenant. That's the covenant, right? The Ark of the Covenant. These things are not talked about obviously like this in the church setting, even though the higher ups and the institutions may know this, but the general flock or the believers or whatnot, the congregation, are just looking at, the two fish, the pairs of fish, and then you got, all these animals in pairs. And then another demonstration is, I think we went over this, is like all these animals represent zodiac signs, right? You got lambs and you got lions and you got fish and things that represent the zodiac wheel as well. So the Bible as it is now after the Nicene Council has been remixed in so many different levels. You have actual tribes of our people, which is true, that were fighting against each other, people that lost their divinity doing certain things. But you got astrological coordinate going on. You got, like we said, the three wise men, which we went over a demonstration how that's the Orion's belt, right? Those three stars and all that. They refer to as three magi, and but the magi is also the high priest and the Moors. I was teaching the people. So see how many different the average if you're not getting this type of background knowledge, you're not going to connect all these dots. So the people that are running these institutions, they're going to talk about it from a lens to just, line their pockets or people in general out of ceiling of understanding, you know, and that's why it's not really a demonstration. A lot of these religious institutions, the neighborhood that these churches are in, or something, even some of these mosques, um, especially in LA, heavy gang activity around there. It's homelessness. It's you know, if an institution is there since the 50s and 60s, it should be a demonstration, you know, that helping the people, at least in that circumference of the area, at least in a 1 mile radius of the building. It should be something great popping off, right? Like there's nothing, so obviously they playing us. That's the bottom line. Um, so yeah, the Ark of the Covenant. Let's get into, Valentine's Day. Yesterday was. Even with this, what I'm about to read is different degrees. I like this one because it's talking about an actual person and you can talk about a timeline. So I like this version. Valentine's Day originated from a Christian monk named Basil Valentine. And we're talking about Moors, Christian Moors. When we dissect this, you're going to see that Morisco Moore, right? And as we read, you're going to see that his conscience got to him and he actually excommunicated himself. And when you look at excommunicate, that means you step down from being a priest, or like I say this person was like, you know what, I want to do my original culture. I know I'm colonizing all that, but I don't care. I'm going to practice my. What's going to happen is the Pope or the Roman Catholic head is going to banish you, and it's called excommunication, where you get put on restriction. All right, so I wanted to set the foundation before I start reading. Okay, so Valentine's Day originated from a Christian monk named Basil Valentine, who was applauded at the manner in which the European men, appalled. Basil Valentine was a Christian monk who was appalled at the manner in which the European men viewed sex and women. They saw women as sex objects, this being a degradation. He excommunicated himself. So he removed himself from the Roman politics. He said, I'm not dealing with these politics. I don't even want to be a saint or a monk no more in this Roman legion. I'm stepping out of this. I'm going to marry the woman so that he could set an example as to how to treat women. His efforts were noble. And for that reason, we appreciate him. The unfortunate part is that this degraded view of women has found its way into the modern patriarchal society and into the minds of many of the once noblemen of the land, the Moorish sons of today, as many, not all, are endowed with this same degradation regarding women. As well, many women have accepted this behavior and passed it on to their daughters for acceptance. Thus, the matriarch must rise. The values therein begin to expose themselves in society. So I wanted to shed light on the Christian monk Basil Valentine. And this is something that happened in history, dealing with Valentine's Day, right? So that ran across, I was reading that, and I wanted to share that.
I have a question.
Okay.
So was it that Valentine's Day was created because he said, I'm going to teach people how to treat women, even though it came from like a dark place? He's saying, I'm going to shower my women with love, and that's why we have all these hearts and all these these chocolate covered strawberries and things like that. That's why that day is celebrated, is to show an example of what not to do.
Yeah, he was responsible for leaving that paradigm that was basically exploiting women, and then so he excommunicated himself, and then he demonstrated he found a woman, and treated her right. So he's representing the essence of what Valentine's Day means, because his last name is Valentine, right? So his demonstration set a precedent for a tradition. I've heard other demonstrations too that are like demonic, but that's not. Remember, we created from Christmas to Thanksgiving, no matter how it's represented today. When we take it back to its original inception, it was always something that was honorable, or we're paying homage to a season and giving thanks, whether it's solstice to solstice or equinox to equinox, something in that space. So this is one of them. This was a Morisco Moor, a Moor that was Roman. Well, he got forced to turn Roman. Remember, after 1492, the Moors that stayed were either Christian monks or high priests, and as Christians though, they're Christian saints now. Saint Maurice being another one. These are Germany right now. We're talking about Moor in Germany that was considered a high priest, the saint, the patron saint of Germany. So these are examples of Moors that were in the Holy Roman Empire that wanted to do some good. They was like, man, I ain't with this. I don't care if I get killed, whatever. I'm just done. I can't do it. My conscience is getting to me, right? So
I have another question. So is this something that should be celebrated since it's a way of cherishing the woman? Is it something that we would still celebrate today? Like, we're talking about ancient versus like modern, right?
Oh, motherfucker up there. Damn.
No, I'm just wondering if that's something that should be celebrated because it's cherishing the woman, right? And honoring the matriarch in a way that, we know where it comes from, but it's still an honorable thing that he was like, I'm gonna show people how to treat a woman. And that's why everyone does the balloons and the flowers and they cherish their woman. And is that something that should be celebrated as like a love day? Even though it should be every day, but it's the vibration is very much higher on that day because everyone's on that page.
Yeah, it's something exactly. Depending on where you at or your mind is at about it, that's really what it's about. Just like Christmas, Thanksgiving, typically people off work, you're around your family. You can transmutate the energy and have it be positive. You don't have to be doing it for a reason that everybody else think is for, whatever. Santa Claus coming down the chimney with gifts and all this. Your mind don't got to be there. So this is just more history about, Valentine's Day that is not really spoke on. Peace and love, Stern, my Bay.
Peace and love.
Any thoughts on this before I continue here? All right. Let's see. Okay. So when we're talking about matriarch, because that was a statement, this last portion of it right here, many women have accepted this behavior and passed it on to their daughters for acceptance. Thus, the matriarch must rise. So let's get into that. What does that look like? Or what is a matriarchy? A state or stage of social evolution in which descent is reckoned only through the female line, all children belonging to the mother's clan. Such a system increases the mother's social and political importance, making her the head of the family and the guardian of religious rites and traditions, right? Habits and customs. And before I continue, a lot of us that have great-grandmothers or witnessed their great-grandmothers, they were typically involved in keeping the family together, making sure the family reunions and things like that. That's an example of habits and customs being preserved, um, innately, right? So that's a matriarchy. Hence, with many writers, matriarchy means not only descent reckoned through the female line or coming through the uterus, humans that come through the uterus, right? But also rulership by women. Others, however, discriminate the rights and customs characteristics of uterine descent as mother right from the political or domestic supremacy of women known as
Kind of,
are you,
gyno. I'm trying to
I'm trying to
say.
see if you go get it. Gynocracy
Democracy.
or rulership of women, or metrocracy, rulership by mothers. Matriarchy, in the narrow sense, is found among many primitive people, where whether it ever existed in a broader sense is disputed. So I didn't get into it because just for sake of time, but in those other books that I referenced earlier, like Golden Age of the Moor and African Presence in Early Asia, you're going to start seeing how a lot of our clans were, they say matrilineal, which matriarch being the root word. All right, so nature is matriarch. Nature is matriarch. Divine law, God's law, and nature's law are synonymous. All right, so like you say, the energy of to yesterday, Valentine's Day, I felt this would be a good lightweight demonstration. And now, once you start getting into that, what do you get into? Birthrights, trust law, the right of blood of inheritance. What is birthrights? Any and all rights, privileges, inheritances, or possessions to which a natural person, that's the key, a natural person is entitled by birth, such as an estate, descendable to an heir, or a civil liberty under a free constitution. So see how the bloodline gets political once it's organized? And you have two types of inheritance. You got corporal and incorporeal. Corporal are so hereditaments is like things you inherit, and they could be visible and tangible, or they could be incorporeal things you can inherit, which are not in themselves or in itself visible or tangible, and a corporal hereditament being heredity or a right or obligation or something you have interest in. For example, intellectual property, the know-how to do something, can be taught by the family and passed on. Now you got a family recipe that you don't got to write it down. You just know how to do it because you was trained properly. You can just pass that information down to the next person in line. You don't got to write nothing down. Intellectual property. An example, right? So matriarch tied to the birthrights, tied to political status, tied to trust law, inheritance laws. And typically, a lot of these empires were built with, it started with clans, or they say the house, like the House of Saudi, or the House of Osman, what they say Ottoman, which later became the Ottoman Empire. It all started with families. The house mean family, the house of this. And then all these houses linked up and formed confederations and formed structure. So the different families linked up that shared the same culture or pledged allegiance to the same culture. These different families linked up and formed nation states and ultimately formed empires. The families organized amongst each other, but man, woman, and child popped it all off. So you see the potential? What can happen? Any thoughts on that comment before I continue to the next aspect of my demonstration here? Since this is a Valentine's Day theme, we're going to keep it in this space regarding man, wife, and love divine. When presented with the commonly presented sectarian instructions or concepts about that which has been called sin, many natural people have misunderstood what adultery is or what it is not, and are confused as to what sin is and what it is not. Essentially, the proper perspective, adultery and sin are applicable to the self when one goes outside of the moral and ethical parameters of divine law and principles. Those who lack clarity see their acts and perceptions only with their carnal eyes. In this state of condition, they are not capable to see spiritually the unseen or abstract nature of the philosophy that underpins the law. It is within the realm of that clearer conceptual philosophies and spiritual seeing that one realizes where divine love rests. Thus, absent of the instructions imparted by the true ancient philosophies, many who cannot see have not experienced love. In regards to the subject of marriage, quote unquote, or better said in a more proper sense, obligations, we present a more honest and actual philosophical fact and view of ancient culture and of that culture as derived from a study of the divine laws of nature. Women in many ancient cultures and matrilineal societies had and still have many husbands. Husband mean householder and a frugal manager who manages prudently and economically. Husbands also serve to satisfy earthly carnal needs. This does not necessarily mean that the woman performs sexual procreative acts with them or any of them. Corporal procreation is not to be confused with corporal recreation. And of course, the time we live in today, this is slow. It's a slow walk. That's not going to really fly probably today. Men, women having many all these husbands. But in principle, it really still is happening naturally, but it's not going to work like, oh, I got 5 husbands. And you just, but it was like that. And it's not necessarily like she's having sex with them all. It's just different people helped assist and was willing to, work together. Hassan, you got your hand up?
Islam, Grand Sheik. So flip that coin around. What about us? Are we permitted to have multiple wives, or was that an ancient thing, practice type thing, or what?
It was actually on both sides, but typically in the women's case, it was an assister. The man might be getting automotive. Somebody else might be good in whatever. And they all work together to get in that house agenda going or whatever, right? And like we read, it might not be no sex going on. The sex might be going on with one of the men for building a family, but the other men is just strictly platonic and they just building. You know what I mean? But
they would call them like business relationships today, I would think, right?
Yeah. But as long as it's nothing crazy going on and everything is being like, okay, I got one man who I'm actually build a family with and procreate with. These other men are just strictly they would building the cause.
Right. Islam. And what I heard too was from if your man died, the other family would take on the woman to keep the family going. So that family would have, the kids would have a father and a family to go. So it was also to keep a family going, that makes sense. But the wife would initiate it. See, the wife would say, you know what? Okay, she seems to be a good woman. She has a good head on her. I'll bring her into my harem or whatever you wanted to call it at the time. So that was all a part of keeping the family together too. I yield.
Wow. In the rooted family. That's what pops all this off. A bunch of families come together and build the house or the clans, confederations, and now it's an empire. It's just multiple families with the same culture that had intention of organizing in such a way to expand, right? Economically, politically, intellectually. Now you got these great empires and these dynasties and all these children that getting created under this paradigm, right? And they getting taught a certain way.
They're house binders. It says husbands are house binders
Mhm.
for the family system.
Right. The glue.
The glue. They bind the home.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts, statements before I continue? How you feeling, Hassan? I'm not sure if he still had a question or if I answered. Or I'm not sure where he was at.
No,
I think-
Islam. I appreciate all the information. Islam.
Or Islam.
I just remembered. I don't know if you have Hassan's email. I remembered Hassan. I have the presentation I downloaded. I need to send it to you, the cyber safety. I remembered that. Sorry, it slipped my mind, but I want to email it over today.
Islam. Okay. Where we leave off? We right here? We read all this?
No, we didn't read that yet.
We're starting right here. Right? Okay. However, culturally, these male friends or husbands are actually said house binders who provide and care for the home that she attends to. The domicile is very important to women, as the domicile is the root of their attentiveness and central to their labors. From home come the children, and the lessons of life bestowed upon them, positive and negative, as they are groomed and prepared to enter society and to partake in those matters that govern themselves and others. Males or sons of women are domestics. They bind the home. When a woman is virtuous and attends to her home, males are obligated to assist. Thus, male men and women become by nature obligated to serve each other and to bring balance to each other. Problems, however, often arise when a woman is not virtuous or when she is not happy, for that affects her, affects the entire home. And whatever or whomever comes out of the home or inside the world reflects in character or in nature positively or negatively.
Happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife, happy life.
We had what was it? The last Step Festival was like an 80-year-old, 70-year-old couple. His words of wisdom was like, man, I gotta tell you something. His words of wisdom, happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have, with respect to the very concept or misconcepts that exist among the people of the world, including the following chapters, which are excerpts from the Secret Mysteries of the Brotherhood of the East. These chapters express the ancient philosophies concerning marriage laws for man and wife from Allah. In Yeshua's lesson or adab lessons regarding love divine, we have also presented a social and cultural contrast and an analysis of the modern marriage contract issued under the jurisdiction of the modern corporate states. So we'll do a compare and contrast. Now, we are well aware of the fact that the secret lessons not exposed to the masses by the high priests and the status quo religious leadership, more often than not, their motives for veiling these lessons have been more for selfish reasons than they are willing to admit to. These higher cultural lessons are not necessarily familiar with the common people. This sociological anomaly is not accidental, for these high cultural lessons are usually kept hidden by the elite. Now, let me go down to the Masonry part. So Masonry, essentially Islam, and Islam not ritualized, is cosmology. It is important for us to view the ancient philosophies for what they really are, cosmoscience, and examine these philosophies absent of our taught biases and prejudices. It is not true nor accurate for us to say that Masons or a fraternal order are progenitors of this information. So it's not accurate to say the fraternal order, like the Shriners, the Knights of Malta, Daughters of American Revolution, Knights of Columbus, all these people brought this knowledge. That would be inaccurate. That's what that means, right? The fact is that the high culture science used in Masonry is actually Moorish science, which in itself is cosmology. Thus, it is important that we recognize ancient Moabite science as the science of the universe or the cosmos, and has been hidden and veiled in masonry. The ancient science comes first. The secret societies and fraternal orders are secondary, modern, and serve as institutional vehicles for dispensing aspects of the culture by degrees. So they're giving you a piece of the culture. You get pieces, and the ceiling is 33 degrees of the pieces. Got that, right? So it's different. Do not assume this relationship to be the other way around. It is also important for us to know that Masonry is not an institution of higher learning that belongs to, nor was its philosophy initiated by the Europeans. It is, in fact, the high teachings of science and the workings of nature given to Europeans by the Moors by way of the Renaissance during the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. The philosophies were given to the Europeans to raise them from the dark ages of superstition, savagery, not bathing, ignorance, and into a new world of knowledge and high culture, which is referred to as the light. So that cross references with that time in Spain, with the plague and all that. That's all in the same lens. Europeans have coveted these. Europeans have coveted these ancient teachings and have kept them away from us. The true descendants of those same Moors who compassionately raised them out of mental, social, and literary darkness. With this high culture science of the universe, the Europeans rule the world. For lack of knowledge and a false assumption, the high culture is of European origin. Many descendants of the Moors have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So, I won't go into this in depth at the college, but I have a whole slideshow. But remember, the theme is life before slavery. So that means the culture, the trade, the government structure, language we spoke, habits and customs. All this is life before they call the cross-Atlantic slave trade, which is from like 1500 to 1700. So we're talking about life before that. And everything we talked about today will be inclusive of that. Let me see if we have time to get into this. It's 12:58. Let me open the floor for some thoughts, comments while I'm looking through. I don't think we have time to go through this one.
It's interesting that also you mentioned the connection between masonry and Islam, because a lot of times my grandfather was a Freemason, my grandmother was Eastern Star, and we had some Masons in the family, and I always wondered about these Shriners and these fezzes and all this stuff. And I used to always hear, and I saw people with certain like things that they were wearing, and they would have like Islamic like sayings or like words and stuff, you know, in Arabic and stuff. And I couldn't understand why would these Shriners and these Masons, what their connection was when I was a little kid. You know, as I got older, it took time, but you know, I love hearing about this because a lot of times people don't like to talk about that, or they don't like to acknowledge that, you know. And I've met people who are Muslim before also, and they don't really talk about that. You know, I had he was kind of like an uncle almost, and you know, he really didn't like to talk about that Masonic side of it. So you know, you couldn't get information from them about that kind of stuff. They didn't want to really talk about it. And so I'm glad to hear somebody talking about it, mentioning it, because it makes me want to like go back and look now again and, you know, find that information. So thank you for that.
Um, yeah, yeah. And I'll go over this next week. But you know, it's Yahshua reveals marriage law of man and wife from Allah. We're, you know, we're running short on time, so I'm gonna go to the next aspect of my demonstration for now. Did anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
Islam.
Islam. James Conway Bank.
I was thinking when you were talking on when you were giving a demonstration about um, the matriarchal principles and how it's especially here in it took me back to the Great Law of Peace. Um, and in it how it talked about how women they had even though men they were in the what you would say the high in the high seats, the women were the ones that put them there, and they gave them the principles and how um, basically the whole thing was ran by women.
Right. Yeah, the chiefs were crowned by the women councils. Yep, the clan mothers. Mm-hmm. Islam. Yeah. So that's right. And that's not. He's referring to the Iroquois, quote unquote, the Iroquois Confederation Constitution, which, like I said, different clans came together because the Europeans were starting to invade the Americas. So a lot of different clans of Moors in America formed confederations. The Iroquois Confederation being the most famous, most notably talked about. As an example of what I mean. Different families coming together for not only protection, um, but just inheritance and things of that nature. So yeah, that's good stuff. That's a good stuff, James Conway Bay. Any other thoughts, comments, statements? All right, so mother and son, the true the true origin of Mason, from an ancient perspective. All right. Um, so when we analyze a man and we analyze a woman, we have different openings, different, right? So obviously in the head, we all have the seven chambers. And we've talked about the circle seven from a different perspective, more cosmological, how it's a master seal because before it's your circle seven, you got 12 zodiac signs broken up in threes. You got four quadrants. You got, drop down the middle. You got four quadrants, three signs in each quadrant. Right? 4 plus 3 gives you the seven. So circle seven represent the mastery of these zodiac signs. Like you understand what they do for you. You just understand what you do for humanity. As far as sociology, working with different people, right? Earth and water promotes growth, for example, etc. Cell saws different foods you may need based on how you came out the womb. You might have deficiencies and stuff, whatever. That's all mastery of the circle seven. But there's also seven chambers in the head, which give you your seven senses, right? That's also another aspect of it. All right. So man and woman both have two eyes to see. The intake valve, we got two ears. This is all intake valve stuff. Two nostrils to smell. That's intake and output because we're inhaling in. It might sneeze or something might come out. We got the mouth. So that's the north gate, right? This is the as within degree dealing with the north gate, but the woman has two mammary glands that the man doesn't have for output purposes. To separate mother and son, right? Both man and woman have a navel, right, which is a gateway to support energy sources upon arrival to the physical plane for the woman.
For the man too, nutrients.
Yeah, nutrients for the man. But then when we start getting to the genital area, you see the vaginal is input and output, and the penis is output. The woman has a urethra. So the woman has more holes in the body. A total of 13. The man has a total of 10. Right. The as above degree, we got the lunar calendar, which is um 13, dealing with the moon cycles and things of that nature. We have the south gate, or the corn of the sacral chakra and below to the root, north gate, south gate. Some cultures will say this is heaven and hell. Heaven is you're dealing with the chakras. Now we're dealing with chakras. You're dealing with the chakras from the sacral all the way to the pineal gland, or you're just dealing with the root. That's why they call it heaven and hell as an example. I found that fascinating. And it's a different perspective on a circle 7. Understanding why it was called the circle 7. A lot of different meanings. I think I'm gonna stop right there with my demonstration before I get into the Treasury report. But I do want to open the floor for any thoughts, comments, and statements. Okay. So let's close out in prayer, and then we'll give the Treasury report.
You gonna record that?
No. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali. Amen. So I'm going to turn the recording off, and we'll go on to the Treasury report.